views expressed on this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of this station, its management, or other advertisers. You're listening to Transformation Talk Radio. Get fired up for Spirit Fire Radio with your hosts, Dorothy, Riddle, and Steve Kramer. Get ready to shine the light on universal spiritual principles and uncover ways that ageless wisdom can guide you in cultivating consciousness in these modern times. Bring purpose to your life through practical spirituality and add to your awareness with Spirit Fire Radio. Now, here are your hosts, Dorothy, Riddle, and Steve Kramer.
Welcome to Spirit Fire Radio. My name is Steve Kramer, and I am joined with my co-host, Dr. Dorothy Riddle. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, Steve. Great to talk with you.
How are you feeling?
Just fine. That's great.
Good. Glad to hear it. So we're going to continue on our journey into right action. We had a wonderful show last week talking about right action. What is it? And this week we're going to talk about why it can be so difficult sometimes. Why is right action challenging? So, Dorothy, both of us, we are a part of educational nonprofits. I would say that both of our nonprofits create tools for individuals to meet that challenge, to rise to right action. And I thought it might just be nice to start the show and talk a little bit about organizations. We didn't do that so much last week, so I thought, let's start that way today. What do you think?
Excellent. Why don't you start and I'll follow.
I would love to. So I help to run an organization called Spirit Fire, and we are collaborating with School for Esoteric Studies, and so happy to be doing so. Spirit Fire is an educational nonprofit, and our mission is to cultivate consciousness and really to educate people on the importance of spirituality in everyday life. So we do that through meditation. We own a retreat center in Western Massachusetts, and we've got our own practice, meditation practice called the Practice of Living Awareness. So really trying to generate a living awareness and give rise to consciousness in your choices so that right action may follow. And Dorothy?
Great. So I'm with the partner organization, which is the School for Esoteric Studies. You can learn more about us at esotericstudies.net. We provide in-depth spiritual training, and our focus is to help people become world servers. In other words, to contribute to the common good, which is part of what we're talking about this month when we talk about right action. And in our training, we also provide training on meditation. We provide structured study, and then we have an expectation that students will be applying what they're learning in service. So all of that presupposes that a focus is right action.
Yes. And so why do you think, Dorothy, just to put you on the spot right away, why do you think it's so challenging?
To do
just right action.
To engage in right action?
Yeah.
I think that there's a couple of things that we'll be exploring. I think sometimes we haven't given it enough thought and practice to figure out what is right action in a particular situation. In other words, we haven't spent the time to think through moral issues, to think through ethical principles. Sometimes we get caught up in wanting to be liked by other people, and right action isn't necessarily the popular choice. And so it's hard to do something that is not what we're going to get a lot of kudos from other people about. And sometimes the action itself is just hard. It's not necessarily what we would even be our own first choice, but it is what's necessary in terms of preventing harm or the good of the whole. So I think there's a lot of reasons.
Yeah, that was very, very well said for me, just putting you right on the spot to define the whole show. But obligation, for sure, obligation can be daunting sometimes, right? If we're faced with a difficult choice, what do we do? If you don't mind, I'd love to sort of tell a little bit of a personal story about my mom, just because I find it to be I find that she was in a very difficult position and had to make right choice. So listeners, if you'll indulge. So my mom, when she was pregnant with me and quite far along in her pregnancy with me, discovered that she had a tumor, a grapefruit-sized tumor in her cerebellum, in her brain, and had to have brain surgery. And the doctors said that the pregnancy should be terminated, and that to go along with the pregnancy would put her health at risk, would put my life at risk, and it would be best to do that. She was under a lot of pressure from her family, from the people around her, and had to, make the choice of what do I do. Certainly her mother, was very concerned that did the family have the resources to care for both her after this treatment, after this surgery, and myself, and what if I had special needs as a result of this dangerous pregnancy, which is wisdom behind that. There was also a bit of fear and some self-protection. So very complicated situation. And my mom decided that she would indeed go forward and she would move forward with the operation, which happened while I was inside of her, and the pregnancy. And she actually flatlined on the table, and as I was a teenager, explained this near-death experience to me and my brother, and said that she even had a choice then again whether to stay or whether to pass on. And she, in a sense, met her maker, and she said, that she wanted to go back. I've asked her that. Why, Mom? Why did you make that choice? And she said, well, I wanted to meet you, and I wasn't ready to go. And apparently she was sort of informed at this sort of juncture that her life would not be easy, but that she could make a choice to go back, and I would live and she would live. And she did lead a very, very difficult life, and there were consequences to that decision. But in her heart, she knew that it was right action. And over time, the tumors kept coming, and she had several strokes as a result of these tumors. And at the end, she decided in her, as she just turned 60, that the quality of her life was not worthy of her going on, and she decided to fast and to take her own life. And she met with each of our family, and she we all had time with her too. She was not in a very good state then, but to say, Mom, is this what you really want? And the repercussions of not eating, and she understood, and all of this. So in the end, she decided when she was ready to go in the end. But as a result, we discovered that my mom had VHL, which is von Hippel-Lindau disease, which is a rare genetic disease that little tumors form in your body, and not a lot of people know about it. Turns out that other members of my family have it, and they didn't know. They would have never known they had it if my mom would have passed at that time. My brother has become the president of this organization, has done great things for it. My nephew wants to be a genetic engineer. He wants to cure this disease and study DNA, and he's making, very great decisions toward that. So, there's an example of really tough choice. It can be difficult to choose, what is the right action and what are the consequences. And luckily, all of the consequences turned out, as I think everybody would agree, to be good. Mm-hmm. But right there,
yeah, that's such a beautiful story and such an excellent illustration. Thank you so much for sharing that, Steve.
Sure. I always, whenever I'm in a situation where I don't quite know what to do, I think, wow, how big is this decision? Okay, right. Really put it in perspective and give it time and know yourself. Go deep inside and get to know yourself. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'd like to introduce a concept that is it's related to your story, but it will take us in another step, and that is the circle of care, which is what I think about. When I think about right action, what is my circle of care? How far does it extend? And, of course, as a cosmic citizen, I hope that it extends very, very broadly, that it includes actually not only me, my community, other humans, but non-human persons, the environment, the living earth on which supports our lives. But that whole, when we cut off that circle, when we say that there's a boundary and people outside of that circle matter less or don't matter at all, that's, I think, when we start getting into trouble. And I'd like to share, Steve, something that's been in the Canadian news. People may be aware that with the xenophobia that has been unfortunately fueled through the presidential campaign and the current presidency, that there are a lot of people, especially Muslims, that don't necessarily feel safe. People of color and people of other faiths that don't feel safe in the U.S. And so there's been this stream of refugees walking across the Canadian border, typically in the middle of Canada. They've done it in winter. They've lost toes and fingers. There's been a lot of focus on that. But I just recently, in the last couple of days, heard about a stream of refugees into British Columbia, where I live, that I had been completely unaware of. And the reporter said, I don't have independent verification of this, but what the reporter was saying is that these are Muslim women with their small children who are literally walking across the border from the U.S. to Canada. And they are doing that because it's not that they're illegal in the U.S. They've got proper visas, but their husbands are abusing them. So they're victims of domestic violence within their own communities. They're not getting support to stand up to the husband for cultural reasons. And because of the xenophobia, they don't feel safe going to the public services that ought to be available for any woman who is the target of domestic violence. So the decision that they are making is to walk to Canada, which is an amazing decision. But the point that I wanted to bring up is there's a woman in Vancouver who has set up a safe house for these women, to receive these women. And she is getting criticism. And this is the right action challenge that I wanted to bring up. She's getting criticism because these refugees are, quote, taking up too much of the resources. And BC is already a receiving province for incoming refugees from Syria and other places. And so the public outcry is, we've got to save resources for ourselves. We can't be spreading ourselves so thin. How is it that you are now adding this group to the people that we have to be responsible for?
Wow. Complicated.
And
or not, actually,
exactly.
As you say, at times it's so simple yet so complicated.
Yeah. I mean, she is very clear. They interviewed her. She's very clear that this is an important service. So we would say that she's taking right action, but she's getting a lot of pushback for doing it.
Wow. Dorothy, we're going to go to a break, and I want to pick right up where we left off after the break, because I think there's quite a bit going on there about our role in being role models of right action. So we'll talk a bit more about this right when we come back.
Treat the Body and Expand the Soul on June 1st with Lynn Brown. In this all-inclusive retreat, you'll treat your body with breakout sessions in the various elements of nature, enjoy fireside chats while harnessing the healing energy of fire, allow more light with more ease, and activate that connection between the body and spirit. Call 206-931-7356 or visit lynnmbrown.com.
Do you feel that there's a bigger, better life for you? Is there anything holding you back from living the life you were meant to live? If you'd like to find your life's true purpose and calling, join the world's foremost authority on primal spirituality, David Carshare, in Becoming a Son Radio, emotional and spiritual intelligence for a happy, fulfilling life. Tune in once a month to Becoming a Son Radio with David Carshare on The Dr. Pat Show and Transformation Talk Radio. For more information, visit davidcarshare.com today.
Brand consultant Jen Morgan is here with Radically Distinct Radio to help you take control of your future and maximize your brand's power to produce results. Whether you're an individual trying to reinvent yourself and launch a new venture, or you're an executive trying to reposition your company to modernize your sales and marketing programs, Jen Morgan and the RAD Method empower you to play to your strengths and show up in the world as your most powerful brand. To learn more, go to jenmorgan.com, that's Jen with 2 N's, Morgan.com, or call 206-972-5366.
Chris Stanis is a spiritual leader and healer and teaches a course on how you can transform your life through a meditation and healing system that will manifest your spirit's dreams. She manifested the Women of Wisdom Conference, the Women of Wisdom book, and this radio show. And she can show you how to change your life too. Are you ready? Visit the website and contact her at voicesofwomentoday.com. That's voicesofwomentoday.com.
Curious about the meaning of life? Do you want to deepen your spiritual practice? The School for Esoteric Studies offers online training to spiritual seekers from all paths of life and individual coaching. Our courses synthesize Eastern and Western spiritual traditions based on meditation, study, and service applied to everyday life. The school also organizes group meditations each year to benefit humanity. Whether you're just beginning to reflect on the spiritual side of your life or are a more experienced spiritual seeker, the school warmly welcomes you to join our group. To learn more about our courses and services, please visit esotericstudies.net. That's esotericstudies.net.
Welcome back to Spirit Fire Radio. Dorothy and I were talking, or rather, Dorothy was telling us just before the break about the plight of women walking across the border from the United States to Canada. And it's just shocking to hear this and to think about. We were talking about the difficulties of right action and how choices can sometimes really be so difficult. So, I can only feel into this choice of taking your child and walking across the border. And I can imagine only places where you can walk across the border would have to be somewhat, I would think, dangerous, because in actuality, you're not on roads because that's where there would be border patrol. So I would imagine, Dorothy, right, that some of these women are really walking across some pretty rough terrain.
That would be my expectation. I'm not intimately familiar with the whole border area, but to me, Steve, I'd like to broaden this out. It is an example also of what happens when our role models are not modeling right action. And people in positions of authority, we referred to that before, people in positions of power, have a tremendous ability to influence what people think is okay, what is acceptable. And through the Trump candidacy and now presidency, we are seeing things modeled that we have never seen, at least in the United States, modeled on the public stage that way as being the way to be. Just a couple of them.
Well, Dorothy, just sorry to cut in, but you had said what I found interesting in what I wanted to come back to is that you had said that the response from people within BC was, hey, we've got to sort of look out for our own. We need these resources for ourselves. And that the woman who created the safe house realizes, well, human beings are a resource. Our resources are humanity. Like, we've got to look out for ourselves is the human, is humanity as a whole. And I would, just highlight that, because indeed that actually is what this administration seems to be putting out there, which is, let's just look out for ourselves. The wall
Right.
was sort of the symbol, of that whole election.
Right. Thank you for that. And in fact, that gets to the that's actually the title of the my trilogy is Enough for Us All. That's the subtitle for each of the volumes. That there is enough for us all. We don't have to feel threatened. We don't have to feel that we have to put our own needs first if we are approaching life from a sense of abundance, and as opposed to greed and the feeling that we're okay, the more we have, the better we are.
Yeah, it comes down to expansion versus contraction, really, on every level. Do you live with a concept that is expansive and inclusive and realizes there is abundance, or do you come from, a contracted sort of limiting attitude towards life?
Right. Well, for example, the whole America First it's coming from a taking perspective. The idea that if the trade balance is not even or in the U.S.'s favor, that somehow somebody's taking advantage of the U.S., when in fact, in some instances, you're going to be better at something than I am, and in other instances, I'm going to be better than you are. So it is very much that kind of self-focus, promoting only one's own interest as opposed to the good of the whole.
Yeah, and it actually doesn't work. What we keep seeing again and again with so many of those decisions is we are a global community in so many ways, even in financial ways. And this idea of, cut everyone else off, America first, let's fend for ourselves, it doesn't work. It's not who we actually are. It's not the truth of our existence really anymore. And
well, that may be true, but what we see happening is this constant repetition of, quote, alternate facts,
yes,
and a constant dismissive and undermining of expertise and proven facts, so that the focus is on winning, on putting me first, as opposed to a shared view of what is factually accurate about our experience. And that over and over and over again, and actions that fall in that line, weaken the moral fabric of society.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And I think what's interesting about this idea that there are that the focus is on alternatives, it's hard for me to say, on alternative facts, is because we don't actually live in a me world. We live in a we world, and it takes alternate facts to support that, because actually the truth is that we have to be cooperative, or the system will break down. I mean, that is so much a part of your series of books as well. So I think it's interesting that there's so much about fake news and alternative facts, because they're necessary to blind people. They're necessary to push this agenda of me and I'm the only one, we're the only one, because it's actually not factual.
Well, and we also see, we see this harshness and disrespect continually modeled as opposed to civility. And so then if you notice what's happening is that expectations of mature behavior actually are dwindling. And when something is done, especially at the presidential level, that ought to be just normal behavior, it's seen as exceptional. Isn't this wonderful? When in fact that's the way one would expect people to behave all the time. So our expectations of ourselves, our expectations of others, again, are being undermined, are being thinned out in terms of really being who we are, which is interconnected and part of a whole.
Well, and I find that it also numbs us to that fact. We talked a bit about that on the last episode of the show about, setting an example. If we don't see the example enough, we become numb to what is right or what is wrong. And we almost start to accept wrong action as being right. And I find that we get sort of so jazzed up by the drama of it all. We sort of see it as entertainment, and entertainment has gone it's gone in the direction of being an adrenaline rush, that we sort of harp on this drama so much that we can't even discuss what's inherently wrong on a moral level about some of the behavior of our president. And, on that level, just last week, I couldn't believe it. The president was, gosh, it's hard for me to even say that. Anyway, he was with members of the UN, and he was with Nikki Haley, who is the UN ambassador for the U.S., and he literally said, with her just beside him, this group of dignified individuals said, "Do you like her? If not, she can be replaced," and laughed. I mean, I was actually heartbroken. I just thought the level of disrespect that he is offering here, and the low, it was a low for me. And I thought, what kind of example is he setting? It's just exactly along the lines you're talking about.
Well, it was disrespectful on several levels. It was disrespectful in terms of her competence, which is the basis on which she should be judged, as opposed to whether she's liked or not.
Yes.
It was disrespectful in treating her as though she were an object that was interchangeable with anyone else. And so if people didn't like her, then he just moved somebody else in. It
set
was
off cuff like that is just so shocking. In literally that she's beside him, it's as if he could just pick her up and remove her and put someone else in her place. Yes, I agree. That's it. Just shocking.
So, this illustrates the importance of our being very careful about who we actually do choose as role models. That we can't, at least right now, depend on people who are in positions of authority as necessarily being good role models, although they're supposed to be more mature. But this doesn't seem to be the case these days.
Yes, absolutely. And just to add, just that the disrespect in that scenario with Nikki Haley was to the entire UN, really saying that any of these people, it's sort of putting him again in this position of, I'm in a position to replace any of you, even the UN. And that people are thinking of his talks about NATO, and it just all really does speak in a sense of his immaturity and lack of intelligence and just lack of respect for all the work that has been done in the name of right action. So you just have to say, wow, and hope that we will in time not be so taken by the drama of it all, and look to role models, look to those who are working to create a higher ground, from which to operate within this environment of, at least within this country or globally. Tim and I used to ask at the end of every radio show last season, when we had guests on every week, that if you had a spiritual council that you could go to at any moment, who would be on this council? So in a sense, we're asking people, who are your spiritual role models? And Oprah Winfrey would always come up. I'm wondering who's one of your role modals.
Well, I have to say the Dalai Lama.
Ah, very good.
Whom I met when I was a teenager. So it's a very dramatic moment in my life.
Beautiful. He would come up quite often too, and good enough that a lot of people would say their mom or their dad. Anyway, so we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the challenges to right action and why it can feel like we are going against the tide sometimes in choosing to do the right thing. We'll be right back.
What is a brilliant culture, and how do we create them? Why are they important? Claudette Rowley has created a breakthrough 5-step process to help you align your culture with your business strategy for exceptional results. Looking for a culture that drives organizational excellence? Listen to Cultural Brilliance Radio, the second and fourth Friday of each month at 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern on Transformation Talk Radio. To learn more or work with Claudette, visit culturalbrilliance.com.
Thrive is what we experience when our mind, body, and soul operate as one. When we thrive, we excel on all levels. Thrive is the mindset that matters. It is essential to our being. Have you ever found yourself looking for the instruction manual on how to thrive? You'll find everything you need to help you feel strong, powerful, and peaceful in your own body. So don't waste any more time. Visit thrivebyjen.com today.
Hi, I'm Steve Kramer of Spirit Fire Radio, and I believe that meditation changes everything. It leads us in the direction of greater well-being, and that's a fact. I struggled with meditation for years. I understood the principles, but I found it hard to incorporate them into my everyday life. Spirit Fire's meditation practice changed that. It's called the Practice of Living Awareness, and it's taught in 14 steps. These are 14 tools that I can use in any moment, on and off the cushion. Steps like smile, flow, and ground of being support my clarity of mind while I'm navigating the ups and downs of modern life. That's why it's called the Practice of Living Awareness. If you'd like to add meditation to your daily experience, the Practice of Living Awareness is free, online, and it's suited for any level of practitioner. Visit spiritfire.com for more information. And be sure to check out Spirit Fire's meditation retreats in Western Massachusetts. It's all there at spiritfire.com.
Get ready to experience Truth Talk Radio with host Deb Acker. Tune in to Truth Talk Radio each Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific on TransformationTalkRadio.com to illuminate the truth in your daily life as you experience life, love, and abundance from a whole new perspective. This hit show will leave you feeling lighter and bring you into a place of infinite possibilities every day in every way. Visit TruthTalkRadioshow.com for upcoming transformative topics and guests. Tune in to the hit show Mouthing Off with Chef Rossi. Chef Rossi mouths off about different subjects in pursuit of breaking down walls and opening up your minds. She and Dr. Pat banter back and forth, taking from the headlines of the day on subjects that reach beyond what goes on in the world into your hearts. And go to theragingskillet.com to find out more and let Chef Rossi know what's on your mind.
Welcome back to Spirit Fire Radio. We are talking about why right action is so challenging. And just before the break, we were talking about the challenges that we face when what is being modeled for us so publicly is not right action. Now, I just want to comment, Steve, that one of the silver linings of all of this is vastly increased civic engagement of people saying, no, this is not right, this is not right. So hopefully this is building that muscle of thinking, you hear somebody in authority say something, you have Congress saying this is the best way to go, and then you have to think about it yourself. Do you agree with that? There was a very interesting radio program that I want to share with you and our listeners, and this is an interview with an emergency room doctor who practices in Canada and also goes to African countries and works in emergency rooms and does training there. And his preoccupation is with how to reduce the errors that occur in emergency rooms. And what he observed was that there were a number of biases that were precipitating wrong action. And he realized that there was some critical thinking that was missing in medical school training. And so he started a pilot program, which is going on right now at Dalhousie Medical School, to help medical students and and practicing physicians become aware of their biases. And he identifies things like in that emergency situation, people think sometimes that any action is better than inaction. But actually that's not the case. We talked about this last week, that sometimes inaction is better for the moment than taking the wrong action. He talks about how people take in new data and screen it or filter it to confirm what they already thought was going on, or they see one solution and they just stop at that. They don't look for other things that are going on. Anyway, it was, to me, a really good illustration of part of what we have talked about in terms of the need to be mindful of how you are deciding what is right action. And the emergency room is a perfect playing field, if you will, because it is a situation where you have to make very quick decisions. So if you don't rehearse ahead of time, and we talked last week about that thing of rehearsing, thinking through different options, being aware, so that when you're in that situation where you don't have the time to deliberate, you can trust that your reflex will be right action.
It sounds like he's really generating a sense of responsibility, and even asking them to be creative with their responsibility, right? To not just, this is what I've been told and I will do it that way, and that fits every situation, is really understanding the sort of full range of what does responsibility mean, the ability to respond. And wonderful. Appreciate that. It often when you're talking about as soon as you said the emergency room being a place where reaction and action is inevitable, it happens very fast. It also makes me think of New York City. Living in New York City, you are just amongst people and the human story, and so often you just walking down the street come across so many instances where you are given the opportunity to act one way or another. You have to deliberate. You have to sort of decide what's right. And you mentioned biases too. Certain biases will come up straight away. And I was just reading this morning, it seems so apropos for the show, on social media. A friend of mine had a post that he was on the subway, a crowded subway train, and a homeless person got on and made this announcement that he was hungry and he had no resources. And my friend had just come from Whole Foods and had a grocery bag and took out, he says, one Granny Smith apple, which he loves, and went to give it to the guy. And the guy said, I don't want that. I don't eat apples. And said it as if he was crazy. And so right away, the way he described this scenario, I could see that, when you're on a subway train, a lot of people will just do nothing. If a homeless person comes on and sort of says, I need help, somebody, could you assist me? And people all sort of go through this process of, am I going to help? Am I not going to help? And you're on a spotlight, as this person passes in front of you, everybody's sort of not only watching to see what you will do. So there's this idea of we are part of a complex situation, even though this scenario is certainly not as complex as an emergency room, but it asks us to ask who we are. And so my friend said that he gave the guy a dollar bill, reached in his hand and said, this isn't for your hunger, but it's for your performance as a hungry person. And then the whole train sort of giggled at that because they heard it. And some person said, I would eat okra if I was hungry to the gentleman. And it turned out that they all sort of got in this dialogue. But at the end of the day, people were very reluctant to sort of help this person because they sort of denied, they had this idea. And it was interesting on social media to see all the responses, some people saying, well, it's dignified to say what you want and what you don't want. And it was an interesting dialogue as to what's right action in that situation. But going against the tide can be very complicated, right? Somebody hungry is asking for something, and you feel, wow, it would really be going against my human nature to not give them something. Or being a New Yorker, you think, I bet this is a scam, and it's actually going against the tide to give them something. And being in an emergency room where really an action could be life or death, and you've got to make a choice. And, maybe what you read in the book or what you were instructed, what you learned in school was to take this course of action. And actually your intuition or your capacity for insight and creative thought says, no, I think this is the proper action. It's complicated, right? I mean, it's very complex, this idea of what is right and what is wrong.
The scenario that you described reminds me of a repeated situation that I was in as a young person growing up in India, where at that time, I don't have knowledge as to whether this is happening now, but at that time, there were beggars, some of whom were begging in their own right, but many of whom were being run as kind of a gang. There would be somebody in charge, and whatever money they got, they were to take back to that person. In fact, sometimes people, especially children, were injured so that they would elicit more pity and they would earn more money. And so what I was taught by my parents was to not give money, but to give food, because the food could be consumed by the individual. It wouldn't go back to whoever was running the gang. But oftentimes, if there were other foreigners there, they would kind of scowl. If you weren't going to give money, if people were asking for money, then you should give money. And so instead, giving food, or if I didn't have food, saying, "Maaf karo," forgive me for not giving, as opposed to giving money, was hard sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. I find that we always have to look inside and sort of ask, who am I? It really generates that sort of inner questioning and inner searching as to who am I as a human being, and do I know this situation, and can I contemplate, as we've been talking about, of what are my options and what would be proper? What is my truth in this situation? And anytime a situation like that asks us to consider our own truth or truth, we just simply become accustomed to truth and searching for it, which is so important. As we were talking about fake news, truth, it seems we're always searching for truth, right?
Right. Well, and also there's the whole issue of, what's called social desirability, having other people approve of you. And I think we've touched on this lightly other times, but there's that very difficult situation where somebody tells a joke that is racist or sexist or xenophobic, and you don't laugh, whereas everybody else is laughing. Or, if you laugh, you're basically saying that's fine. I think for me, that's an example of action going against the tide.
Yeah, it can be difficult and educational for many people.
Right.
to sort of stand up and say, I won't go along with this. I just, I can't do it. My moral fiber says no.
Mm-hmm.
I've certainly been in that situation before. I know. It seems we should talk a little bit about, when your moral fiber says no to such a strong degree that you find you have to rise up, against an organization even, or a government or a law. And I know you've had quite a bit of experience with that, or some experience with that. And I think it would be interesting to hear your views on civil disobedience, or on what it means to stand up and just say no, either in a group or when there might be repercussions at hand. So when we come back, Dorothy, let's talk about that for a bit, huh?
Okay.
Sounds great. We'll be right back.
Gifted intuitive healer and spiritual teacher Sarah Luce brings her unique style to the hit show Small Steps, Big Breakthrough Radio on TransformationTalkRadio.com. Tune in each month as Sarah turns reality on end and shows us how to experience expansive results with simple yet powerful steps. Expect an enlightening bend on what you currently believe is possible. For show details and upcoming topics, visit sarahluce.com. That's SARALOOS.com.
Awareness is universal. Establishing a living awareness through meditation brings peaceful, healthy, and creative well-being into your everyday life. The practice of living awareness, Spirit Fire's own meditation practice, is built on this belief and is designed for every level of practitioner. Each year, Spirit Fire hosts living awareness meditation retreats that allow you to explore the practice in depth at our retreat center in beautiful Western Massachusetts. Introduce yourself to meditation and the practice at the Foundation's retreat. Attend, in silence, a silent meditation retreat focused on mindfulness, presence, and nature, or be engaged with the meditation sittings themselves at the Deepening Retreat. Start adding to your awareness and attend a meditation retreat designed to cultivate consciousness in your everyday life. For details on attending a Living Awareness meditation retreat, visit upcoming events at www.spiritfire.com.
Are you feeling stagnant or blocked in your love life, career, health, or finances? Experiencing difficulty focusing or setting and achieving goals? Tune in to Spiritual Diagnostics Radio with psychic visionary healers Carol Dorian and Justice Welling. Discover the cause and effect of unwanted patterns in life. Tune in every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. For more information, visit spiritualdeed.com.
Be you plus live your purpose equals joy. That's the motto of Unstuck Joy with Vicki Todd. Vicki believes you were born with gifts that are meant to make the world brighter. Each show will feature an art visioning journal prompt to help you create your way to soul clarity. If you're ready to get unstuck and create more joy, this show is for you. Tune in every month on Transformation Talk Radio. For more information, visit VickiWorldArt.com.
Tune in to The Jen Royster Show, intuitive guidance to inspire your life, each Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific and 11 a.m. Eastern on TransformationTalkRadio.com. This amazing show is an inspirational hour that will take you on an epic metaphysical journey to discover the spiritual approach to life's greatest challenges. Dr. Jen is an internationally known intuitive counselor, spiritual teacher, and energy healer. Call in for intuitive readings and visit JenRoyster.com for more information.
Welcome back to Spirit Fire Radio. Dorothy and I are having really a wonderful conversation about right action. And for me, I can't help but think of certain individuals who have just simply stood up and said, no, I know I was a part of what's called Storm the NIH, which was really demanding that the U.S. government and the National Institute of Health acknowledge the AIDS crisis and work harder towards creating, research that would lead to a cure. And it was very empowering, really moving to stand on group and say no, and to say, hey, look at us, we're here. We need to be acknowledged. And I think of Rosa Parks and the courage it must take to do that as an individual, to observe a situation and just finally deep within your essence, your soul, say, no, I will not play by these rules. I will not sit in the back of the bus, and I will take a seat forward, and I will deal with the consequences. So really tough, Dorothy. I'd love to hear perhaps some of your experiences or even thoughts on civil disobedience. I know you've processed these ideas quite a bit.
Well, yes, and I've certainly taken my part in vigils or demonstrations where I think there's a difference between where you are asserting your right to stand up for a particular position, in a context where you don't have to also cross a legal boundary. But even so, I mean, like I took part in peace vigils, always aware that I could be arrested, I could be jailed. Friends certainly were. At a minimum, I knew that the FBI and FBI were taking pictures, that they were tapping my phones. There are consequences to that kind of action, even if it is within the legal limits. That is, you stay, on the sidewalk, or you stay outside of the boundaries, you stay on public land where you are allowed to protest. But then there is the issue of civil disobedience, where you know going in that there are going to be legal consequences. It's not a matter of there might be, but there will be, because you are breaking a law and you're doing it very consciously. And I'm delighted that you cited Rosa Parks. I think people like that are, they are to be venerated. They take a stand at a time. They accept the consequences, and it's because of that stand that things change. I think of Nelson Mandela and the years. Was it 27 years that he was jailed? And there are other people that have stood up. Martin Luther King, and all of the marches that happened with Selma and the others. And unfortunately, sometimes that kind of civil disobedience is the only way that change comes about. And I think what it underscores is that whole sense of moral fiber, moral compass, which I know we're going to talk about next week, that if we know in our heart of hearts that something is wrong and we do nothing, we diminish ourselves. We become less than who we can be. And so there's a certain sense from which, when you're in that kind of situation, you almost don't have a choice, right? If you're going to be true to yourself, true to what you know is moral and right, then you have to take a stand.
Yeah, or you just feel that you can't go on not living your truth. It's quite powerful. One thing I love about Martin Luther King was that he had the breadth of vision to see that there had to be freedom for the oppressed and the oppressor, that it was a liberating of everyone. When we would find the dignity within our fellow human beings, we would all be liberated, that we were actually, that it was actually the oppressor who was oppressed, by ignorance. And he saw that we were going to free ourselves as a group, as a humanity, and I respect that very much.
Yeah, and that's really critical if you're going to heal, because it's interesting in the Ageless Wisdom teachings, there are two things that could be seen to be contradictory. One is that you do not take a side, because then what you're feeding into is a separatism. And if you take if you're so strongly aligned with only one side, then how can the healing occur? On the other hand, you need to act for the common good, or for right human relations. So it's that tension of finding a place to stand, to take a stand, where you are supporting truth in a way where it's going to be possible for there to be a healing and for the two sides to reconcile, as opposed to one side winning and one side losing.
Right.
Because that's just a recipe for ongoing disaster.
Yes. That the situation will end up at a higher vibration and more expanded than it started. That should be, what we're aiming for. Well, I think that's a good place to end. Again, goodwill and right action, right relations, our choices. At the end of the day, we can ask ourselves, will it result in goodwill and right relations? And good means, the word good means we've got to decide for ourselves what is goodness, what constitutes goodness. And goodwill, we have our own will, we have willpower, and thus it is our responsibility to understand that and know that there will be consequences when our will is acted upon. And when I think of again, the word right in right relations, morals, and kind of how do we assess what is right and what is wrong? And in right relations says, well, we are all related and our actions will affect others. It is inevitable. So I think that leads us to quite naturally next week's show, which will be strengthening our moral compass. What is goodness, and how can we take responsibility and create right relations amongst ourselves. So I look forward to that. I look forward to this week of deeply pondering that and coming back to the show and having a wonderful conversation. Any final thoughts from you, Dorothy?
Yeah, I just want to put those two words out there, which I think are so important. Truth and reconciliation. I mean, that's the process that is so necessary. That's the process, that is being experienced in a number of different places. You have to have truth. You have to look clear-eyed at what has gone on, what your own role has been in it, and then you have to find a way to come together to reconcile, not conquer.
Yes, beautifully put. Well, listeners, it's been lovely, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Spirit Fire Radio. If you have any questions or comments, if you'd like us to talk about them online or talk a bit about something more that you had a question about, send us an email to spiritfireradio@spiritfire.com. And you can find out more about Spirit Fire at spiritfire.com. And Dorothy, School for Esoteric Studies?
At esotericstudies.net.
Wonderful. It's been great to be with you, Dorothy. I look forward to chatting next week.
Absolutely. Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Spirit Fire Radio. Tune in each Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern for your weekly guide to purposeful living and practical spirituality. Join hosts Steve Kramer and Dorothy Riddle as they shine the light on universal spiritual principles and uncover ways that ageless wisdom can guide you in cultivating consciousness in your everyday life. Add to your awareness with Spirit Fire Radio. To learn more, visit spiritfireradio.com.